Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles, and welcome to Power Talk, my podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. I cover topics related to spirituality, hypnocoaching, and the hypnotic arts and sciences. If you'd like to know more about my work or sign up for my free e-newsletter, Power Lines, check out my website, which I'll tag at the end of this video. Today I want to talk about a saying created by German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He wrote, "That which does not destroy me makes me stronger." It's aphorism number 8 from the Maxims and Arrows section of his book, Twilight of the Idols. This is a saying that is much quoted and shows up in political campaigns, movies, self-help material, and many other places. I've seen it in a lot of spiritual pronouncements. I've even seen one person who had it tattooed on themselves as a reminder. Now, I've always believed that there was something to this aphorism, but at the same time, I've felt uncomfortable about it. Because as a pastor, I fully understand that there are people who experience adversity and, while not destroyed by it, are wounded by it, and those wounds can last for a long time. An example might be a combat veteran with post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, maybe the war experience didn't destroy them because they did survive, but they were certainly not made stronger. In fact, many have experienced deep psychological wounds that will persist for a very long time. And I'm sure you can think of other examples. And take a person who had fallen in love, married a partner in good faith, only to experience a disastrous end to that relationship that left them full of self-doubt, anger, feelings of betrayal, and fear of commitment. Well, the experience didn't destroy them, but it certainly did affect their lives, and not necessarily for the better. So the saying isn't simply true, and it isn't simply inspirational. There are problems with this aphorism. But that said, there is also scientific evidence that the aphorism may be correct. As an example, consider that there is a Swedish town over Kalax that for some reason has the most comprehensive and verified birth, death, and farm productivity records apparently in the world, at least according to author Stephanie Fu and recounted in her book, What My Bones Know. Analyzing all of this data has led social scientists to discover that while there were good and bad years for the farms in this village, there were some really bad years where people actually went hungry. And when you crunch the numbers, it turns out that children who suffered deprivation of food between the ages of 9 and 12 years old grew into adults whose children ended up living an average of 30 years longer than those children of other parents. So the fact that one's parents had suffered partial starvation somehow had an effect on their offspring. And those offspring also had lower levels of heart disease, diabetes, and other inflammatory conditions. So that which didn't destroy the parents somehow benefited them genetically, and they passed that benefit on to their children. On the other hand, those same records show that people who grew up in times of plenty had descendants who were more than 4 times at risk for heart disease and had a much lower life expectancy. The theory is that the hardship experience somehow caused a genetic change that made the offspring of those who had experienced hardship more resilient. An interesting proposition. However, as a philosophical person, I'm not so sure. For example, it is quite possible that people who grew up knowing hunger and deprivation also grew up with a deepened understanding of how important healthy nutrition and other forms of care were. And so they fed and sheltered their children carefully and treated them better. And that could easily explain the improved health and life expectancy of those offspring. Now, in the philosophy of science, this is called a confound, meaning that there may be additional factors that call an otherwise logical conclusion into question. We see this in hypnotism too. There is a school of hypnotic theory that claims that most adult inflammatory conditions and many emotional problems are rooted in some sort of trauma experienced as a young person. Those practitioners who cleave to this theory will often use a technique called regression to cause with abreaction, meaning that you hypnotically take a person back through time in their imagination until you get to the traumatic event. Then you guide the person to re-experience the event in a new way, often assisted by adult understandings of what happened, and that this then resolves the trauma. For example, consider a client who suffers from poor self-image because of parental emotional abuse. In regression, the client discovered that the parent was actually a secret alcoholic. They recalled the parent drinking while alone or at night. And that gave a whole new understanding of why the abuse occurred. The client understood then that they were never the real problem in their family, and so when they return from the regression, their self-image is repaired. Or that's the theory. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way, and if done poorly, this technique can actually harm a client by forcing them to relive a trauma that was better off left alone. Because that which does not destroy one does not always make one stronger. Even when it works, the reason why it worked may not be clear, as there could be a confound. I remember when I was in training, a demonstration of regression to cause with abreaction was performed by the instructor. The demonstration client had a powerful experience and upon emerging from trance declared that she had a whole new understanding of why her relationships always failed, because she realized she was never taught how to form healthy human attachments as a child. All well and good, until I ran into her some years later. She had done some research into her early childhood and realized that it was not possible that the things she remembered during the regression had actually happened. Her mother did not have a partner during the time the client thought she had re-experienced. She was not actually living where she thought she had lived when she did the regression. Her mother and her sibling had very different recollections of life events during the period, and those recollections were incompatible with the supposedly remembered experience during the regression experience, hence a confound. Now, there is an explanation for things like this. The client liked the hypnotist and unconsciously wanted to please. Therefore, her imagination constructively created a fantasy that met the social expectations of the training regression and seemed to provide an answer and a resolution. But both were actually bogus, even though in good faith. Now, still, she was helped by the regression experienced, and the help she received was real, but it wasn't what it seemed. Just like Nietzsche's aphorism, there is validity to it. We're often shaped by the bad things that happen, and if we handle them well, we learn from them and become more capable. Sometimes. But there are times when that does not happen, and one is not to blame for that. You can still learn from those experiences. You can expand your understanding of yourself and your world, but they do not necessarily make you stronger, and things which seem to suggest that they will may not be valid due to confounds in how they're interpreted. So yeah, always try to learn from your past. If there are lessons you can learn, by all means learn them. Become stronger. But if those lessons have not actually made you stronger, that's okay too. That which does not destroy you does not necessarily make you stronger, and you're not to blame if that's the case. Hey, thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject. I'd like to invite you to join me. It does help me if you let others know about my work, so please like, share, and subscribe. And if I can be of help to you, feel free to reach out. Have a great week.